The chapel was quiet, the late afternoon sun spilling gold across the aisle, yet the air felt charged, electric, as if holding its breath. All eyes were on the bride as she stepped forward, flawless in her gown, radiating beauty and grace, but it wasn't her elegance that made the groom freeze. Her gaze locked on him, piercing, familiar, unsettling. She stopped halfway down the aisle and in a voice soft yet commanding asked, "Do you recognize me, Apache man?" A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. The words struck him like a lightning bolt. He searched her face, trying to place the feeling clawing at the edges of his memory. Childhood laughter, secret hideouts, and adventures he thought were long forgotten flickered before his eyes. Who was she really? And why did her presence stir a past he couldn't yet fully remember? Every instinct screamed that this was no ordinary bride and that what came next would change everything. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the gathering. The wedding venue was nestled at the edge of a rolling meadow where wildflowers swayed gently in the late afternoon breeze. Guests, dressed in their finest attire, mingled with glasses of sparkling wine in hand, exchanging polite greetings and soft laughter. Yet amid the hum of excitement, a quiet anticipation lingered in the air, as if the land itself held its breath for what was about to unfold. At the far end of the aisle, framed by an arch of intertwined roses and delicate vines, a figure appeared. She moved with an elegance that seemed almost otherworldly, her presence commanding attention even before she fully revealed herself. The bride? Clad in a gown of shimmering ivory, its intricate lace and silk flowing like liquid light with every step, she was a vision that stole the breath of all who watched. Her hair, dark and lustrous, cascaded in soft waves over her shoulders, and a veil, almost ethereal, framed her face, hinting at a mystery beneath. There was a radiance about her, not just in her beauty, but in the quiet confidence with which she carried herself, a magnetic aura that made every eye turn instinctively toward her. Among the crowd, the groom stood near the altar, his heart caught somewhere between nerves and exhilaration. He had seen brides before, of course, but there was something about her, an unspoken familiarity that tugged at the edges of his memory. He shook his head slightly, trying to dismiss the thought. Perhaps it was simply the striking way she moved, or the way the sunlight seemed to cling to her, painting her in golden halos. Yet, as she drew closer, he felt the inexplicable tug of déjà vu, the sense that he had known this woman far longer than mere hours of wedding introductions could account for. Guests turned to whisper among themselves. The bridesmaids, dressed in soft pastels, mirrored the elegance of the bride but could not rival her quiet intensity. Children fidgeted in their seats, pointing excitedly at the spectacle, while the older relatives exchanged approving nods, commenting on how radiant the bride looked. The air was thick with the scent of fresh flowers, mingled with the faint trace of incense from the small chapel nearby, and the soft strains of a string quartet floated lazily across the open space, underscoring the surreal perfection of the moment. And then she stopped. Midway down the aisle, the bride halted, her gaze locking onto a single figure, the groom. The crowd murmured in curiosity, sensing a pause in the expected flow of the ceremony. She raised her chin slightly, her eyes alight with a mixture of mischief and recognition. There was something in the way she looked at him, something that cut through the formalities and spoke directly to memory, to history. "Do you recognize me, Apache man?" she asked, her voice calm yet charged with an undercurrent of emotion. The words hung in the air like a challenge, unexpected and electrifying. The nickname, the familiarity, it was as though she had thrown a stone into a still pond, sending ripples through the groom's mind. He blinked, caught between shock and curiosity, trying desperately to locate the memory that her gaze demanded he acknowledge. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The world around them, the flowers, the guests, the soft music all faded into the periphery, leaving only the two of them suspended in a fragile bubble of recognition and suspense. He could feel a strange, almost magnetic pull toward her, a sense that beneath the delicate lace and flowing silk, this woman carried fragments of a past he had long buried or forgotten. His pulse quickened, not out of fear, but from the thrill of an unexpected connection awakening after years of dormancy. Every step she had taken down the aisle, every detail of her presence, now seemed loaded with meaning. The world waited in hushed anticipation, yet neither of them seemed fully aware of it, caught instead in the gravity of an unspoken history suddenly demanding acknowledgement. This was no ordinary wedding moment. Something larger, something deeply personal, had begun to unfurl in the quiet intensity of her gaze and the weight of her words. In that instant, the groom realized that the bride was not just a figure of beauty or ceremony. She was a reminder, a living echo of memories long ago, calling him to recognize what had been hidden in the folds of time. And as the crowd leaned forward in hushed curiosity, the groom's mind raced, searching, trying to remember, feeling that life was about to shift in ways he could not yet understand. The moment stretched, taut as a drawn bow, as the bride's question, "Do you recognize me, Apache man?" echoed softly in the quieted crowd. Gasps and whispers fluttered like startled birds around the meadow, yet neither seemed to register to the two at the center of this unfolding drama. The groom stood frozen, a mixture of confusion and curiosity tightening his chest. He stared at her, attempting to reconcile the familiar cadence of her voice with the striking, almost ethereal figure before him. How could this woman, so radiant and composed, have any connection to the boyhood memories he thought were long buried? The bride, sensing the hesitation, allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile, a hint of the girl she had once been. "You don't remember me yet, do you?" she asked softly, her tone carrying no judgment, only the gentle patience of someone who has waited a long time for recognition. Her eyes, deep and compelling, searched his face for a flicker of acknowledgement. They were eyes that had seen the same skies, breathed the same winds, and laughed over the same secrets decades ago, and now they were attempting to pierce the layers of time and memory that had grown between them. She took a slow, deliberate step closer, and the faint rustle of her gown seemed to pull the groom from the periphery of the crowd into the orbit of their shared history. "I was your childhood friend," she said, the words simple yet weighted with years of meaning. "We played in the creek behind your house, built forts in the woods, and shared secrets that we swore we'd never tell anyone else. Don't you remember the days when we were inseparable?" Her voice carried a warmth that was both comforting and jarring, a sound that reached into the hidden chambers of his memory, stirring echoes he had almost forgotten. The groom's brow furrowed as he tried to access the past, trying to pull together fragments of time he had not thought about in years. The nickname Apache Man rolled over his tongue in thought, teasing the edges of memory. Slowly, like a key sliding into a long unused lock, flashes of laughter, scraped knees, and the carefree joy of boyhood came rushing back. He could see her again, smaller then, hair tangled and eyes alight with mischief, running alongside him in the dusty paths of their neighborhood. He could feel the warmth of those long summer afternoons, the weight of a promise to always be friends, and the secretive thrill of adventures shared in whispered confidence. The bride's gaze did not waver. She seemed to read the battle playing across his features, the internal struggle to reconcile the woman before him with the girl he had known. "You were always so brave," she continued, her voice a soft reminder of the past. "You led our little adventures, even when we were scared. And you always promised me that no matter where life took us, we would find our way back to each other." There was no accusation, only the gentle persistence of memory reaching out to reclaim its place in the present. Around them, the guests shifted uncomfortably, sensing the intensity of a private conversation unfolding in public. The string quartet faltered slightly, caught off guard by the sudden weight in the air. The bride, however, was impervious to the world around her. Every word, every nuance of expression was a bridge to the past, a way of reconnecting threads, of a shared history that had lain dormant. She leaned slightly forward, just enough for the groom to feel the sincerity and depth of her words. The unspoken truth that the past had not been erased, it had merely been waiting. A tremor of recognition passed through the groom. His heartbeat quickened as the fog of years began to lift, revealing the vivid colors of memory. The creek where they had built rafts, the old oak tree where they carved their initials, the summer evenings spent chasing fireflies until darkness settled over their childhood world. It was all coming back, rushing at him like a river breaking through a dam, powerful and overwhelming in its force. The bride's eyes softened, and she took another step closer, bridging not just the physical distance but the gap between past and present. "I never forgot you," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the soft murmur of the crowd. "And now, after all these years, here we are. Do you remember me truly now?" For the groom, the question was no longer rhetorical. He felt a flood of emotions, astonishment, relief, nostalgia, and a strange, undeniable joy. Recognition was dawning, the weight of lost time lifting as he glimpsed the continuity of a bond that had survived the passage of years. The bride had spoken the words that unlocked the past, and in doing so, had rewritten the boundaries of his present. The groom stood frozen for a heartbeat that stretched into eternity. The words of the bride, "Do you recognize me, Apache man?" "And I was your childhood friend," echoed in his mind, bouncing off the walls of memory that had long been sealed. He blinked, attempting to grasp the reality before him, but every rational thought seemed to falter. How could this woman, so radiant and poised, possibly be the girl he had known in muddy shoes and torn clothes, laughing and racing through the fields behind his childhood home? Confusion clouded his mind like a sudden fog. He wanted to speak, to say something intelligent or appropriate, but his tongue refused to cooperate. Memories flitted in and out of focus, like fragments of a half-remembered dream. A small hand reaching for his as they crossed the creek, a shared secret whispered. Under the ancient oak tree, the laughter echoing off the hills as they played imaginary games of hero and villain. Each memory was vivid, yet fleeting, slipping through his mental grasp before he could hold it firmly. "Childhood friend?" He murmured, almost to himself, the words tasting foreign as he spoke them aloud. The nickname Apache Man hovered at the edge of his consciousness, teasing him with the familiarity of something long forgotten. Where had he heard it before? What adventures had they shared that merited such a name? He closed his eyes briefly, willing his mind to dredge up the past, but the images were like reflections in water. Disturbed by the ripple of disbelief dot around him, the world continued, but it seemed unreal. Guests shifted, whispers rippled through the crowd, but none of it truly penetrated his bubble of uncertainty. He could see the bride's eyes on him, steady, patient, almost pleading for recognition. Her gaze was calm yet piercing, a reminder that the truth lay somewhere within him, waiting to be acknowledged. He wanted to reach out, to bridge the distance between them, but fear and doubt held him back. Was it really possible that fate had returned this long-lost friend to him at the most unexpected of times? He tried to reason it out. Perhaps it was a coincidence, someone who looked like her, someone who knew the nickname, playing a trick or creating drama on his wedding day. Yet the sincerity in her voice, the warmth in her smile, and the unmistakable glint in her eyes told him otherwise. There was no pretense, no performance. This was someone who knew him in a way that transcended the formalities and customs surrounding the wedding. The familiarity was real, though it eluded his grasp. A surge of conflicting emotions coursed through him. Excitement battled hesitation. Recognition fought denial. Nostalgia tugged at his heart while reason whispered caution. How could he reconcile the striking beauty and maturity of the bride with the messy, carefree girl who had run barefoot through sunlit fields, laughing without care? He could almost hear the echo of their childhood voices, yet the present reality, her elegant gown, poised composure, and the expectant eyes of the wedding guests made it seem impossible. He opened his mouth, intending to speak, but words failed him. Instead, he swallowed hard, trying to steady his racing thoughts. His mind was a whirl of half-formed memories, questions, and the faint glimmer of something he had not felt in years. The certainty that someone out there had once been his closest companion, someone who had understood him in ways no one else ever could. Could it really be her? Could the universe truly have returned this piece of his past to him, wrapped in the guise of a beautiful bride standing before him on what was supposed to be the happiest day of his life? The bride stepped slightly closer, her presence pulling him from the haze of confusion. "I know it's sudden," she said softly, "and I understand if you don't remember everything right away. But I've carried these memories with me, and I never forgot you, even after all these years." Her words were patient, gentle, yet imbued with a quiet insistence, like a lighthouse cutting through the fog. The groom took a shaky breath, feeling the weight of her gaze anchor him in the moment. Recognition was beginning to stir, like the first rays of dawn piercing a long, dark night. Images of the past surfaced more clearly now, their shared adventures, their laughter, the small yet profound ways they had shaped each other's lives. And still, confusion lingered, tangled with disbelief. Could he truly accept that this remarkable woman was the same girl who had been his companion through the simplest yet most unforgettable moments of childhood? The realization hovered just out of reach, tantalizing and terrifying all at once. He wanted to speak, to confirm, to reach out and embrace the truth, but uncertainty still gripped him. And yet, even in that fog of hesitation, there was a spark and instinctive recognition, a pulse of memory that told him that somewhere deep inside, he had always known her, even if he had not realized it until this precise, breathtaking moment. The bride's gaze softened as she observed the storm of confusion in the groom's eyes. She seemed almost to anticipate his hesitation, the way one expects a shadow to appear when the sun dips behind a hill. "I can help you remember," she said gently, her voice carrying the quiet assurance of someone who knows the truth is waiting to be found. She did not rush him. She merely extended a bridge toward the past, allowing him the space to step across it at his own pace. The crowd around them seemed to fade further into the background, the soft murmur of conversation and the occasional clink of glasses now distant echoes. In that suspended moment, the meadow, the arch of roses, and even the warm sunlight felt like elements of a dream, supporting the fragile tension of rediscovery. The groom's eyes searched hers, seeking confirmation, and in response, she began to speak of fragments of memory that had once defined their shared world. "Do you remember the creek behind your house?" she asked softly, a note of amusement threading through her words. "The one where we spent hours building rafts out of sticks and leaves, racing them downstream until they sank and we laughed until our sides hurt?" Her tone was gentle, yet precise, each detail chosen carefully, like a painter placing a brushstroke to form a recognizable image. She was painting the past with words, coaxing it back into the present where it belonged. The groom's brow furrowed as his mind sifted through the haze of years. The name of the creek floated up like a fragile bubble, and with it came a rush of sensations. The cool splash of water on sunburned skin, the earthy smell of damp soil and moss, the thrill of secret victories when one raft stayed afloat longer than the other. A laugh escaped his lips, involuntary and raw, as the floodgates of memory began to open. He had not realized how deeply he had missed these moments, nor how their absence had left a hollow space he had never truly acknowledged. The bride stepped closer, her eyes alight with an understanding that transcended the awkwardness of the present. "And the old oak tree," she continued, "do you remember it? The one at the edge of the woods where we carved our initials, where we made our first promises to each other?" Her fingers moved as if tracing the contours of an invisible tree, guiding him back to the place where childhood had been most vivid. "I remember every knot in that bark, every summer evening when we sat beneath it, talking about everything and nothing at all. I remember feeling like nothing could ever come between us." Each word she spoke acted as a key, unlocking not only memories but emotions he had long forgotten. The warmth of companionship, the thrill of unspoken understanding, the exhilaration of endless afternoons spent in shared discovery, all of it came rushing back, weaving a tapestry that connected him to a past he had thought irretrievable. He could see her then, smaller and unassuming, but full of the same spirit, the same daring curiosity, the same loyalty that had defined her presence in his childhood. "I waited for this moment," she admitted, her voice dropping slightly, vulnerable, yet resolute. "Not in the way you think of waiting, impatient or desperate, but as someone who knew that life sometimes scatters people, yet never truly separates their hearts. I never forgot you, and now that we are here, I had to tell you. I had to remind you of who we were." The groom felt the weight of her words settle over him, gentle yet insistent. The crowd no longer mattered. The music no longer mattered. Only the two of them existed in this suspended reality, tethered by memories that were now alive once again. A slow recognition, hesitant but undeniable, began to take root in his chest. He remembered not just the adventures and games, but the trust, the loyalty, and the bond that had endured despite time and distance. He swallowed hard, feeling a lump rise in his throat. The confusion that had clouded his mind began to dissipate, replaced by clarity and a strange sense of relief. He was no longer grasping at shadows. The past had returned to him, piece by piece, reshaping the present in its image. It was as though the bride had unlocked a door he had forgotten existed, revealing a room filled with the warmth, laughter, and trust of their shared youth. The bride smiled softly, sensing the shift within him. "Do you remember now?" she asked, her voice gentle, patient, and unyielding. Her eyes, bright with recognition, seemed to reflect not just the memories she had spoken of, but the hope that their bond could survive this moment, and perhaps even flourish anew. The groom nodded slowly, words failing him for the moment. The fog of uncertainty lifted, and in its place came a sense of grounding, a realization that some connections, no matter how long dormant, are never truly lost. The revelation had begun, and with it, a journey back to the friendship and perhaps something more that had always been waiting for him. As the bride's words settled into his mind, the groom felt the first tremors of memory rise from the depths of time, bringing with them a vivid tapestry of the childhood they had shared. The world around him, the sunlit meadow, the wedding guests, the floral arch faded into the background as his mind traveled backward, slipping into the warm, dusty afternoons of their youth. He remembered the creek behind his childhood home. First, the water had been cold and swift, running over smooth stones that glistened like jewels beneath the sun. He could see her small hand reaching for his, gripping tightly as they launched their makeshift rafts of sticks and leaves, cheering each other on as the current claimed one raft after another. They had raced and tumbled, their laughter echoing against the banks, fearless and endless, as though the world existed only in those moments. The memory was so tangible he could almost feel the sting of the cold water, the wetness of their clothes. and the exhilaration that had made each adventure feel monumental. He saw the old oak tree at the edge of the woods, their secret sanctuary. Its massive branches stretched toward the sky like protective arms, and its bark bore the deep grooves of age which they had carefully carved with their initials. Sitting beneath it, they had shared secrets that felt eternal, promises of friendship, whispered dreams of impossible adventures, and plans for futures they could not yet imagine. He remembered the way she had leaned against him, trusting him with her smallest fears, and how he had felt a fierce protectiveness in response, the kind only children know when they believe that their bond could withstand anything. Their games came rushing back in fragments, sometimes silly, sometimes daring. He remembered the Apache man adventures she had given him, the playful nicknames she had bestowed when they had imagined themselves as heroes defending a hidden world, fighting invisible enemies and exploring uncharted territories. They had fashioned swords from sticks, shields from planks, and armor from old scraps of cloth. Their battles had been fierce and triumphant in their imaginations, yet beneath the play lay a deeper sense of trust, the knowledge that they would face anything together. He recalled their shared routines, small yet sacred. How they had spent summer mornings running barefoot across fields, chasing fireflies at dusk, and hiding in secret nooks of the woods, daring each other to explore further. How they had laughed at each other's mistakes, comforted each other's fears, and found joy in the simplest moments that had seemed ordinary then, but now shone with extraordinary significance. The memory of them sitting under the stars, whispering stories and dreams until sleep overtook them, pressed against his heart with a bittersweet ache. He remembered her voice, sharp and lively, echoing across the hills as they played. He could almost hear the timbre of her laughter, feel the energy of her presence, and recall the warmth that had always accompanied her near him. There were days of scraped knees and bruised elbows, arguments over which game to play, and the comfort of reconciliation that always followed. Every detail, her stubborn determination, her daring ideas, her boundless imagination, returned to him in perfect clarity. One flashback brought him to the day they had built their first raft together. He could see her face, flushed with excitement, hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, eyes shining with the thrill of success. They had pushed the raft into the creek and watched it bob and weave down the current. When it sank, they had shrieked with laughter, splashing and chasing each other in a carefree abandon that seemed like freedom itself. He realized with a pang of nostalgia how formative those days had been, shaping him into the person he had become, and how her presence had been a constant source of courage and companionship. The groom's heart ached with recognition. These were not just memories of a friend. They were the foundation of his childhood, woven deeply into the person he had grown to be. Each memory brought a sense of intimacy and understanding that had been absent from his adult life, now flooding back with vivid intensity. The bond they had shared, innocent, pure, and unshakable, was still alive, buried beneath layers of time but never broken dot as the wedding crowd continued to murmur and the music played softly in the distance. The groom's eyes slowly returned to the present, and there she was, the bride standing before him, a living reminder of every moment he had just relived. Every memory whispered the same truth. This woman had been, and still was, his closest companion, his partner in adventure, his confidant from a time when the world had seemed smaller and yet infinitely grand. For the first time, he truly saw her not just as a bride, not just as a stranger, but as the girl who had run beside him through endless days of laughter, danger, and discovery. Recognition surged through him, powerful and undeniable, pulling him toward her with a gravity that had survived years of separation. The memories crashed into the groom all at once, like a sudden storm breaking over calm waters. His pulse quickened. a thrum of adrenaline and wonder coursing through him as the fragments of childhood he had just recalled began to coalesce into a clear, unmistakable truth. He looked at the bride, really looked at her, and in that instant, something within him shifted. Recognition was no longer tentative or uncertain. It blazed fully awake, illuminating a bond he had thought lost to time. Her eyes, so steady and warm, reflected the same spark he remembered from years ago, the playful, daring, insatiably curious spirit that had defined her. The elegance of her gown and the sophistication of her presence no longer masked the girl he had known. Instead, they highlighted the journey from childhood to adulthood, the resilience and growth that had carried her to this very moment. And yet, beneath it all, she was undeniably the same person, the companion of his earliest adventures, the keeper of secrets, the friend whose laughter had once echoed through the fields behind his house. A smile began to form on his lips, tentative. At first, as if testing the waters of a long-forgotten connection. Then, without warning, it broadened, a full, unguarded expression of joy and relief. He could hardly believe the enormity of what he was feeling. Recognition sparked not just in his mind, but in his heart, a warm, radiant light that chased away the fog of confusion and doubt that had clouded his consciousness only moments before. He opened his mouth to speak, and words spilled out before he could filter them. It's really you," he stammered, his voice thick with emotion. "I remember now. He paused, trying to steady himself. The images of their childhood, the laughter, the scraped knees, the adventures in the creek and the woods, all of it surged forward, overwhelming him with both nostalgia and delight. He reached out instinctively, his hand trembling, as if to bridge the years that had separated them. The bride's smile deepened, her eyes sparkling with satisfaction and something softer relief, perhaps, that her memories were no longer hers alone. She took a step closer, closing the small distance between them, and the crowd around them seemed to vanish entirely, leaving only the two of them suspended in a private world of rediscovery. "I knew you'd remember," she said softly, her voice a melody that carried both certainty and tenderness. "I never doubted it." Recognition ignited more than just memory. It brought a flood of emotions he had not anticipated. Joy, relief, wonder, and even a touch of guilt all surged together. How could he have forgotten her for so long? How had life carried them apart, scattering pieces of their shared past into the corners of memory? Yet now, as he looked into her eyes, the guilt melted into awe, replaced by the simple, undeniable truth. She was here, alive and standing before him, a living embodiment of all he had cherished and lost. He felt his chest tighten, an unfamiliar lump rising in his throat as he struggled to contain the intensity of the moment. Memories intertwined with reality, the past blending seamlessly with the present. He could see the creek, feel the sun on his back, hear the echo of their laughter, and yet simultaneously he could feel the soft fabric of her gown under his gaze, smell the delicate perfume that clung to her, and hear the hushed whispers of the wedding guests who had unknowingly witnessed this moment of profound reunion. A wave of warmth surged through him as he realized the depth of the bond that had endured all these years. Recognition was no longer simply intellectual. It was emotional, visceral, a tether connecting the man he had become to the boy he once was, and to the girl who had always been part of him. Every thought, every memory, every sensation screamed the same truth. They were inseparable in a way that time and circumstance could never fully sever. For the first time, he reached out, his hand brushing hers. The contact was electric, simple, yet charged with the weight of years and the gravity of rediscovery. She met his touch without hesitation, a quiet affirmation of the same truth. And in that moment, the groom felt a profound sense of alignment. as if two halves of a long-lost whole had finally found each other again. The bride smiled, and he returned it, laughter bubbling through his chest, a mix of disbelief, joy, and a deep, abiding recognition. It was more than just remembering. It was acknowledging, embracing, and celebrating the bond that had survived the passage of time. And as they stood there, hands nearly touching, the world around them seemed to hold its breath, honoring the spark of recognition that had ignited. Between them at last, the groom felt a surge of emotion he had not anticipated. Recognition had sparked within him like a flame, but now it burned brighter, consuming the lingering haze of uncertainty and hesitation. He looked at the bride, truly looked at her, and the depth of connection they had shared in childhood revealed itself in full clarity. It was no longer a memory confined to the past. It was alive, breathing, and reaching into the present with undeniable force. Tears pricked at the corners of his eyes, though he resisted them at first, unsure if such emotion was appropriate in the midst of a wedding gathering. But she did not flinch. Her gaze, steady and warm, encouraged him without words, as if to say, "It's okay, it's allowed." And in that silent permission, the floodgates opened. He saw the girl he had known so long ago, the one who had run barefoot through the fields, built forts in the woods, and laughed without fear standing before him, transformed into a woman of breathtaking poise. Yet unmistakably the same soul he had cherished as a child. She took a step closer, and the groom felt an irresistible pull, an emotional gravity that had survived years of separation. Memories and present sensations intertwined. He could feel the warmth of her presence, the softness of her hand within reach, the faint scent that reminded him inexplicably of summers past. Each small detail, each subtle gesture, seemed charged with significance, as if every element of the moment had been orchestrated to heighten the intimacy of their reunion. "I can't believe it," he whispered, his voice thick with awe and nostalgia. "All this time, I never realized." He trailed off, overwhelmed by the flood of recollection. He remembered the creek, the oak tree, the games, the secrets, the laughter, and above all, the sense that they had been inseparable in a way that no distance could undo. And now, after years apart, she was here, confirming every memory, validating every long-forgotten promise of friendship and loyalty. The bride's lips curved into a soft, knowing smile. "I've waited for this," she said, her voice gentle yet resolute. "I never forgot you, and now that you remember, I just needed you to see it too." She extended her hand, not in formality, but in a gesture that bridged time itself. He took it without hesitation, the contact electric and grounding all at once. It was a simple touch, but it carried the weight of years of separation, the triumph of rediscovery, and the unspoken acknowledgement that their bond had endured every test of time and circumstance. Around them, the crowd remained oblivious to the emotional gravity of the moment, chatting quietly and exchanging pleasantries. Yet for the groom and bride, the world had contracted to a singular focus, each other. The wedding arch, the music, the sunlit meadow all faded into soft background tones as the intensity of reunion enveloped them. For the first time, he realized that the girl who had shared his childhood had always been part of him, an inseparable thread woven into the fabric of his being. He laughed suddenly, a short, incredulous sound, half in relief and half in astonishment. She joined him in laughter, and for a moment, it felt as though the years of separation had dissolved entirely. Their laughter blended seamlessly, carrying a resonance that reminded him of every joyous, carefree moment they had shared in youth. And as they laughed, tears finally slipped free, streaming down both their faces, mixing joy and nostalgia in an unrestrained, cathartic release. "I've missed you," he admitted, voice breaking, "more than I ever realized." The words hung in the air, intimate and raw, unfiltered by decorum or expectation. She nodded, her own tears shining in the sunlight, and he felt a profound understanding pass between them. This was more than a childhood friendship resurrected. It was an emotional reunion that reaffirmed the enduring connection of two kindred spirits. She stepped even closer, until their shoulders nearly brushed, and the intimacy of the moment became almost tangible. Every laugh, every remembered secret, every adventure they had shared surged through them both, binding them in a renewed understanding of their bond. It was a reunion of hearts, of souls, of shared histories, and the depth of it left them both speechless for a long, silent beat. Finally, he whispered, almost to himself, "It's like you were never really gone." She smiled, a quiet, radiant acknowledgement, and in that single gesture, the groom felt the full weight of the reunion, the bridging of past and present, the reconnection of two hearts that had always belonged together. In the midst of the wedding crowd, under the golden glow of the sun and the gentle rustling of flowers, they had found each other again, and nothing else seemed to matter. The groom felt a surge of emotion he had not anticipated. Recognition had sparked within him like a flame, but now it burned brighter, consuming the lingering haze of uncertainty and hesitation. He looked at the bride, truly looked at her, and the depth of connection they had shared in childhood revealed itself in full clarity. It was no longer a memory confined to the past. It was alive, breathing, and reaching into the present with undeniable force. Tears pricked at the corners of his eyes, though he resisted them at first, unsure if such emotion was appropriate in the midst of a wedding gathering. But she did not flinch. Her gaze, steady and warm, encouraged him without words, as if to say, "It's okay, it's allowed." And in that silent permission, the floodgates opened. He saw the girl he had known so long ago, the one who had run barefoot through the fields, built forts in the woods, and laughed without fear standing before him, transformed into a woman of breathtaking poise, yet unmistakably the same soul he had cherished as a child. She took a step closer, and the groom felt an irresistible pull, an emotional gravity that had survived years of separation. Memories and present sensations intertwined. He could feel the warmth of her presence, the softness of her hand within reach, a faint scent that reminded him inexplicably of summers past. Each small detail, each subtle gesture, seemed charged with significance, as if every element of the moment had been orchestrated to heighten the intimacy of their reunion. "I can't believe it," he whispered, his voice thick with awe and nostalgia. "All this time, I never realized." He trailed off, overwhelmed by the flood of recollection. He remembered the creek, the oak tree, the games, the secrets, the laughter, and above all, the sense that they had been inseparable in a way that no distance could undo. And now, after years apart, she was here, confirming every memory, validating every long-forgotten promise of friendship and loyalty. The bride's lips curved into a soft, knowing smile. "I've waited for this," she said, her voice gentle yet resolute. "I never forgot you. And now that you remember, I just needed you to see it too." She extended her hand, not in formality, but in a gesture that bridged time itself. He took it without hesitation, the contact electric and grounding all at once. It was a simple touch, but it carried the weight of years of separation, the triumph of rediscovery, and the unspoken acknowledgement that their bond had endured every test of time and circumstance. Around them, the crowd remained oblivious to the emotional gravity of the moment, chatting quietly and exchanging pleasantries. Yet for the groom and bride, the world had contracted to a singular focus, each other. The wedding arch, the music, the sunlit meadow all faded into soft background tones as the intensity of reunion enveloped them. For the first time, he realized that the girl who had shared his childhood had always been part of him, an inseparable thread woven into the fabric of his being. He laughed suddenly, a short, incredulous sound, half in relief and half in astonishment. She joined him in laughter, and for a moment it felt as though the years of separation had dissolved entirely. Their laughter blended seamlessly, carrying a resonance that reminded him of every joyous, carefree moment they had shared in youth. And as they laughed, tears finally slipped free, streaming down both their faces, mixing joy and nostalgia in an unrestrained, cathartic release. "I've missed you," he admitted, voice breaking, "more than I ever realized." The words hung in the air, intimate and raw, unfiltered by decorum or expectation. She nodded, her own tears shining in the sunlight, and he felt a profound understanding pass between them. This was more than a childhood friendship resurrected. It was an emotional reunion that reaffirmed the enduring connection of two kindred spirits. She stepped even closer, until their shoulders nearly brushed, and the intimacy of the moment became almost tangible. Every laugh, every remembered secret, every adventure they had shared surged through them both, binding them in a renewed understanding of their bond. It was a reunion of hearts, of souls, of shared histories, and the depth of it left them both speechless for a long, silent beat. Finally, he whispered, almost to himself, "It's like you were never really gone." She smiled, a quiet, radiant acknowledgment, and in that single gesture, the groom felt the full weight of the reunion, the bridging of past and present, the reconnection of two hearts that had always belonged together. In the midst of the wedding crowd, under the golden glow of the sun and the gentle rustling of flowers, they had found each other again, and nothing else seemed to matter. The sun was beginning its slow descent, casting long shadows across the meadow where the wedding had unfolded. The golden light painted everything in a hue that felt almost otherworldly, as if the world itself had paused to honor the reunion that had taken place. Around them, guests continued their conversations, the soft murmur of voices and occasional laughter forming a gentle backdrop. But for the groom and bride, the universe had narrowed to a single, shimmering point, each other. After the emotional reunion, a calm settled over them, a serenity that was rare and precious. The whirlwind of memories, recognition, and emotional intensity had given way to a quiet understanding. They no longer needed to prove or explain. The bond they shared, forged in childhood and rekindled in the present, needed no validation. It existed simply, undeniably, a thread of continuity weaving past, present, and future into one cohesive tapestry. The groom took her hand again, this time with deliberate calm, feeling the familiar weight of her fingers intertwined with his. "I can't believe it," he murmured softly, almost as if speaking aloud might shatter the fragile perfection of the moment. "All these years, and now here we are. It feels like fate." She smiled, a gentle, knowing smile that mirrored the sentiment in his voice. There was truth in that word, for neither of them could deny the strange, winding path that had led them back to one another. Memories of childhood flashed through his mind again, but now they were accompanied by a realization that those memories were not merely echoes of the past, they were the foundation for the future. Every adventure, every secret, every laugh they had shared had prepared them in subtle, unseen ways for this very moment. He could see it now, the continuity of their lives, the invisible thread that had pulled them together even when they were apart, had led inexorably to this day. The bride's eyes sparkled as she squeezed his hand, a silent affirmation of everything unspoken between them. "We always promised we'd find our way back to each other," she said softly, almost reverently. "And here we are. I never gave up hope." Her words carried a gentle power, a quiet conviction that seemed to wrap around him, grounding him, reminding him that some bonds are simply indestructible. As the sun dipped lower, the groom felt a foul surge of optimism and clarity. The future, once uncertain and cluttered with the distractions of daily life, now stretched out before them with new purpose. They had been reunited, yes, but this was not merely a return to the past, it was an opportunity to move forward together, to build new memories while honoring the old. The depth of their shared history was no longer a relic. It was a foundation upon which they could create a life richer and more meaningful than either had imagined alone. He laughed softly, the sound tinged with awe and relief. "I never realized how much I missed you," he admitted. "Not just as a friend, as everything you've always been to me." She smiled, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face, her eyes shining with quiet emotion. The weight of words seemed unnecessary. The presence of one another conveyed everything that needed to be said. They walked slowly toward the edge of the meadow, hand in hand, feeling the gentle breeze and the soft rustle of grass beneath their feet. Each step seemed to echo with the resonance of the past, yet carry the promise of something new. The wedding around them continued, but it felt distant, almost irrelevant, as though the real celebration was this quiet, intimate acknowledgement of connection and destiny fulfilled. The groom realized, with a mixture of awe and gratitude, that the universe had orchestrated this reunion with a precision he could scarcely comprehend. All the years apart, all the paths that had diverged and converged had been necessary for them to arrive at this exact point. And now, with the present in their hands and the past preserved in memory, they could step into the future together, stronger and more certain than ever. The bride squeezed his hand again, and they shared a quiet, knowing glance. It was an understanding, deeper than words, the recognition of a bond that had withstood time, distance, and life's unpredictable twists. In that moment, the past and present fused, and the future spread out before them, full of possibility, adventure, and unspoken promises. As the first stars began to appear in the twilight sky, the groom and bride stood together, hearts aligned and memories intact. They had rediscovered each other, and in doing so, had unlocked a new chapter, one that honored the past, embraced the present, and looked forward to a future built on the unshakable foundation of their lifelong connection. For them, this was not merely a wedding day. It was the culmination of a journey that had begun long ago in the innocence of childhood, and now, in the radiant glow of recognition, it had found its perfect resolution.